Yeah. So it's all, oh, it's on. So Rishara Finsel is here with us. Lots of y'all love the library like I love the library, and Alice Hardy loves the library, and David loves the library. Everybody loves the library. Yay! Yay! Right. So we thought Rishara would be a great person to come talk with us. She's been the director of the Transylvania County Library since July 2019. Really? 5 years yesterday. She slipped in right before the pandemic. And boy, what a time to come to a new place. Before that, she was library director in Polk County, North Carolina, and she's also worked in public libraries in Northwest Montana. Good heavens, cold. Almost in Canada, that's where it is. Yeah. She was raised in Bat Cave and Broad River, North Carolina. She has undergraduate degrees in art and industrial technology management from Berea, and a master's in library and information science from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. We're really glad you're here.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me here this evening. When Alice asked me to come, she said, "What do you want to talk about?" And I said, "What do you all want to hear about?" And so we're going to do a mix of local library information, but some information about libraries a little bit more broadly. So the first thing, make sure I do this clicker correctly. This is going to be my challenge tonight. I did it earlier. All right. If we have to, I can do hand signals here. So the first thing I'd like to do is have you turn to somebody who's sitting near you and share these questions. So what was your first library experience? And if it wasn't in Transylvania County, what was your first library experience in Transylvania County? And which library was it? So just quickly share with somebody near you. All right. I like to watch this because I can tell that people have lots of memories to share. Okay. So I'll share mine. My first library experience was a bookmobile that came from the Black Mountain Library to Broad River, North Carolina, where my family lived in a cabin off the grid without electricity, back up in a holler. My parents were going through a hippie phase, and and the bookmobile came to my neighbor Pearl's house, and she was a widow, and she was my best friend. So I have very happy memories from my first early bookmobile library experiences. And my first library experience in Transylvania County was in 2014. I was a brand new library director in Polk County, and through the North Carolina Public Library Directors Association, I was given a mentor librarian, and that was Anna Yount here in Transylvania County, a very good mentor to have. And so I came here, and she just talked about, this is library heaven. Transylvania is the dream for libraries. And so when she announced her retirement, I was not looking for a job, but I had to throw my hat in the ring, and I was very fortunate to end up here 5 years ago. So as I mentioned, when Alice asked me to do this, I said, well, we'll talk about libraries in the 21st century. But as soon as she walked away, I said, well, we got to start at the beginning. We've got to look at where we came from to see where we are now. So we'll start at the very beginning. Because today there are over 17,000 public libraries in the United States, plus nearly as many bookmobiles. There are more public libraries than McDonald's, Starbucks stores, or Walmarts. Yes, yeah. So where did that come from? How did that happen? How did we get where we are today? The colonial readers started this. The first colonizers in America brought books with them, but they were expensive, rare, and usually religious. The Puritans who settled New England were, relatively speaking at that time, book people. It was part of their religious values to read the Bible directly and not have it just read to them in the original languages. And that was one of the things that led to the religious break from the Church of England. So they were readers for the time. And at that time, colonial New England had the highest rate of book ownership in the world. So mostly Bibles, usually some other religious text. Access to what we think of as literature, so in that time Chaucer, Dante, Shakespeare, was fairly limited and was almost exclusively accessed by wealthy white men. In the 1700s, these men began to form clubs and societies and pub groups to share their books and expand their discussions and mold their character. And this led to the earliest social libraries. We'll get the hang of this. All right. So social library refers to an association of people not affiliated with a school or a college who band together to share their books. This was usually fee-based. Historically, they've been subscription libraries where you would pay an annual subscription fee to be a member. One of the earliest social libraries, the Library Company of Philadelphia, was founded by Benjamin Franklin in 1730. Yes. So this was his philosophical discussion, so that his philosophical discussion group could have access to books to back up their arguments and their philosophical contemplations that they were discussing. They discovered that was important to have facts to back up their philosophical thoughts. So initially, 10 men met at a tavern and paid their dues, and that was the start of a library containing works of history, geography, science, travel, philosophy, art, and literature. So much broader range of topics than were seen before. This model quickly was copied by libraries throughout the colonies and in the early United States. The founders of Benjamin Franklin's library company included a glazier, a carpenter, and a clerk, but that was somewhat unusual. The subscription libraries that followed tend to be for more affluent members, and usually men. Public libraries are a relatively new phenomenon. Before the 1880s, most libraries in America were subscription-based. And so here's a fun fact. There are still officially 19 subscription-based libraries in the United States, and one of them is in Tryon, North Carolina. Yeah. It's a little bitty library called the Lanier Library. And Benjamin Franklin's library is still going strong. It's a large library these days. In the late 1800s and the early 1900s, there was a boom in building libraries in the United States. Libraries were a point of civic pride. If your community was going to be worth anything, you needed to have a library. They were championed by philanthropists, most notably Andrew Carnegie. We all know about Carnegie libraries. They're big, beautiful monuments to books and learning. He gave what would be the equivalent today of $1.8 billion to construct almost 1,700 public libraries in the United States. It's a lot, yes. But although he gets much of the glory, the true powerhouses and drivers of widespread development of libraries, public libraries, were women's clubs. Yes. Women's clubs swept the nation in the post-Civil War progressive era and established the idea that women had a moral duty and responsibility to transform public policy. So this included everything from educational reform to juvenile justice, suffrage, environmental issues, and libraries. Club women believed that having access to books made people's lives better. Don't we all, right? Yes. In many cases, the clubs started through their own private libraries, which evolved into public libraries through advocacy, lobbying, fundraising, and volunteering. Women's clubs were responsible for the existence of 75 to 80% of all public libraries in the United States. All public libraries in the United States. That's huge. They were often scrappier and less flashy than the Carnegie libraries, but they got more places. And often the first librarians came from these clubs at these libraries. The library boom brought libraries to many more people, much more than the early social libraries. However, the women's clubs were largely comprised of upper-class white Christian women, and that was reflected in the early libraries they created. Library access was far from universal. As a result, Jewish, Black, and working-class women started their own clubs and mutual aid societies and their own libraries. In 1896, the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs was formed. They were huge supporters of public education and advocates for public libraries, especially in the South. So, how does that connect here? Well, in the South, things tended to be a couple years further behind than in New England when it came to library development. And in July of 1912, in Transylvania County, the United Daughters of the Confederacy rented a room on the second floor of the fraternity building on South Broad, and then just a couple months later, with a collection of 300 books, they moved to a 600 square foot bungalow beside where the courthouse is. And that's that bungalow. It's pretty, yeah, teeny tiny. The library was originally open 3 afternoons a week. Membership was $1 annually, and books were rented for 5 cents each per week. And today that would be about $1.60 per book per week is how that comes out to. In many early documents, the UDC library was referred to as the Confederate Memorial Library. And this is a clipping from the, I think it's Transylvania Times, maybe Brevard News, an early newspaper. The UDC library is a memorial and attractively situated as it is in one corner of the public square. Who will deny that it is a monument more inspiring and more enduring than any block of granite which might have been erected in its place? So probably not the most welcoming library, we know that. That's pretty clear. But that was the first roots of library access in Transylvania County. Now in 1935, it became a free public library under the supervision of Brevard College. The UDC turned it over and it kind of hopped around to a couple different places. In the 30s, it was apparently run by a couple of college students for a while. It might have been run by the Works Project Administration for a while, and until ultimately the Women's Civic Club became interested. Oh, that's too many. We're going backwards. Okay, there we go. Sneak peek. So through the efforts of the Women's Civic Club, a financial commitment of $250 annually was given by both the county and the city of Brevard. And in 1944, Elizabeth Capp, a professional librarian, was hired for $25 a week. With both local support and a professional librarian, it met the standards to become recognized as a public library by the state of North Carolina. And at this point, it was open to the public. It wasn't a membership library anymore. Miss Capp would go on to lead the library for 38 years. Yes. That year, in 1944, the Transylvania County Library began with a budget of $1,668 for the year. That's also the year that the nonprofit Transylvania County Library Incorporated registered with the state of North Carolina with the purpose of providing a public library for the people of the county. Although Transylvania County Library, which is what it was called then, received most of its funding from local governments, it operated as a nonprofit, not as a county department. There's the bookmobile. This is a Transylvania County, this is the first Transylvania County Library bookmobile. in 1949. Even though outreach service, mobile service began in 1945, when Miss Capp, Elizabeth Capp, decided to lend library books out of the trunk of her own car. The aim there was, as the bookmobile, its aim is today, that it had the aim of making library resources more accessible to rural residents. In 1949, the library purchased and retrofitted a Chevy panel truck for use as a mobile library. Of course, this did not work very well when it was raining, when any sort of inclement weather. And so in 1960, they got a walk-on bookmobile, what we think of today as a bookmobile. So that was going outside of Brevard. It went throughout the whole county. In 1953, a colored branch of the county library operated out of the Rosenwald Community Center. Mary Kilgore, who was a driving force, if you know anything about the history of this county, behind the community center, was the head librarian. She took courses in library science and was paid $20 a month. And so Ms. Capp was paid $25 a week. It's unclear how many hours this library was open. We don't have an apples-to-apples comparison, but it certainly was less resourced. Ms. Kilgore worked as a librarian because she was also running a preschool out of the community center and doing many other things. An article from the paper at that time notes, many requests have been made for books published by or about Negroes, and 70 of them have been purchased by the County Library Board. As we all know, it's so important to see representation, to see reflections of yourself, and that was some of the first examples of that in our library system for the county. Even when public libraries were integrated, in many places that meant that Black patrons were forced to use the back door and be subjugated to limited hours. As a result, libraries often became important civil rights battlegrounds. In 1960, the Greenville Eight, led by young Jesse Jackson, sat down in the reading room of the whites-only Greenville County, South Carolina library until they were arrested. So, of course, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed discrimination of public accommodations like libraries, but that doesn't necessarily mean things changed overnight. So, as you can probably imagine, a lot of these histories weren't recorded. We don't know at the library, I say we at the library, don't know a lot about how that happened. We're digging around and trying to better document that history of how the library integration happened, how long the community center acted as a branch of the library. But that's something that we'll throw out to you all. If you know that or know people in the community who know that, send them our way. We would like to better understand that period of history. So back to the main library, which this 600 square. There's a bookmobile, there's a library for the Black community, but the county library is still the tiny 600 square foot building, or an oversized shack, as this headline put it. And it was bursting at the seams. I really love this picture of Daisy Norton, one of the early library workers. There are just piles of books everywhere. So, in 1956, a new library was built for the purpose of being a library. And this is where the Veterans Museum currently is, beside the courthouse. Yeah, so it's 2,200 square feet, and it was constructed for just over $20,000. And then shortly after, the UDC building was demolished. This was a massive upgrade, but the community quickly outgrew it, and less than 20 years after it was built, it was time for a new space. I know. Okay. Yes, how many of you, this was your first library? Did any of you, in Transylvania County, yes. Were any of you little kids in Transylvania County and seeing the one before that? No. All right. So this new library opened in 1974 in a former New Deal era post office building. Renovated with county funds and an addition added to the north side, which is what you can see there. They moved into spacious 6,000 square foot space. It was little. In 1986, the children's wing was added to the back, which is what is now the commissioner's chambers. These are pictures from when it opened up, the grand opening. In 1982, the Transylvania County Library became a county department. And I think this is because shortly before that, the city of Brevard said that they were not going to fund the library anymore from their budget. And at that time, all the physical belongings became property of the county and staff became county employees. And that was July 1st. In August of 1982, the nonprofit that had been running the library changed its name to the Transylvania County Library Foundation. And let's see here. Oh. All right. This might look very familiar to many of you, because this was shortly before the move to what is currently the library, because they were in the building for a few decades, but eventually the community outgrew it. So if you saw those pictures before, it was very spacious and open, and this is pretty packed. Oh, we're both hitting buttons now. All right. In the early 2000s, the Transylvania County Library Foundation led a grassroots fundraising campaign for a new library. They committed to raising a third of the funds for a new library for the county. The county committed to funding a third of the cost, and then the additional third came from grants and other governmental sources. I heard somebody talking about this before. And that was an approximately $7 million project, which meant that the Library Foundation raised around $2.3 million. And that was almost exclusively from local donors. And in fundraising terms, small donors, it's not what we would probably consider small in our budgets, but when you talk to fundraisers, it was a ton of small donors. And if you come into the library lobby, there's a whole wall naming them, and potentially some of you all. And it's very humbling. So we've come a long way. The evolution of the Transylvania County Library in many ways mirrors the larger historical and social trends in the United States, maybe a few decades late, but we got there. But where are we now? So today, our mission at the Transylvania County Library is learning, gathering, and growing together. This is what we're trying to do today. Our vision is for the Transylvania County Library to be a vital, trusted source for discovery, inspiration, and information at the heart of a curious, creative, and connected community. That's what we're striving for. And you don't need to read all of this, but these are our values. These were staff developed. This didn't come from the community. The mission and the vision and our goals are all community driven. This is staff driven. So this is how we treat each other and our community. And that is grounded in integrity, inclusion, adaptability, compassion, and fun. So hopefully you see that reflected in your interactions when you come to the library. And our priorities and goals we have three main priorities. The first is learn. We create opportunities so that every child is ready to read and succeed. We encourage and nurture exploration, reading, and learning throughout life. Our goal number 2 is to connect, to provide opportunities for Transylvanians to engage with each other in meaningful ways, and to collaborate to enhance community well-being and civic life. And then our third priority is for people to belong. We want people to be connected in the community and to feel a sense of belonging. So extend library programs and services to all of Transylvania County and create friendly, accessible, and inclusive spaces and services. So what does that look like? I've shared a lot of details, but this is what we're doing today. We've got a wide range of activities that support those goals, and hopefully you'll see that reflected here. This is one of our outdoor concerts that we do in June and in September on Friday nights. These are not in any particular order. We have a seed library so that people can experiment with gardening, grow their own food, test out new things without having to commit to a full expense of a whole packet of seeds. We recently installed 3 story walks throughout the county. There's one at Gorgeous State Park, one at Rosman Community Park, and one at the Pisgah Forest Recreational Complex. And these are changed out regularly. You can walk along them, read a story, do an activity, encouraging people to get outside and move, but also read. We have all kinds of different programs. This is somebody from Chimney Rock Park, showing off an impressive bird there. That was part of our summer reading series last summer, and Alice asked me earlier, she's like, what was it going on in the library today when I came in this afternoon? Because there was a large crowd of children in the meeting room. So we have programs that support activity, learning, exploration all summer long, and that was part of it last year. We recently started a cookbook club where you can sign up, everybody brings a dish from the same cookbook, and we eat together. Yeah. This is a crash course here. Ask me afterwards for more details. We have Zoom passes now. These are day passes to local and regional attractions. From Chimney Rock Park to our newest one is the Children's Museum of the Upstate in Greenville and Spartanburg. We have the Nature Center, the Arboretum, the Art Museum in Asheville, the Science Museum in Asheville. Passes to the Brevard Music Center this summer. So yeah, and they allow you to get in for free. They vary in details, but usually they let in 2 adults, 4 kids. It varies somewhat, but they're really a great deal. You can reserve them through our website. We have craft classes. Every month we do craft activities, so you can try out something new. A bookmobile. And Brenda is our bookmobile specialist. She goes out throughout the whole county. Our kids area got a refresh recently, and we've got new fun furniture and activities for children. This is a library field trip to the landfill. This is a new pilot project for us, going to encourage civic engagement, taking groups of grown-ups out to places in the community that kids might go and have a great time, but that we in our daily lives might not see or interact with. And they called this one the Garbage Safari, is what they called themselves. Chess meetups. This is a picture of the older young man being beat tremendously by the younger young man. We try new things. Last year we did a tiny art showcase and had hundreds of contributions from community members, and it also was displayed at the Arts Council. We have notable speakers. This is Drew Lanham, a naturalist, poet, Renaissance man who was here recently and was, how many of you were there? Yes, that's Jane Carter and David Watkins, and I want to know what they're talking about because it looks like very juicy gossip. But this was the reception beforehand. We are part of an NC Cardinal consortium of libraries, all of the colored-in libraries, all the libraries in Western North Carolina, where we share materials. Also, your library card, your Transylvania County library card, will work at any of these libraries if you go to them. You can borrow materials, you can return materials at any member library. If they've got it, they'll send it here so you don't have to travel. Our library staff likes to go places and learn about things. These are all pictures of library staff at conferences and learning events so that we can know what's going on everywhere else and bring back the good relevant ideas here locally. Oh, I just like this picture. These are also library staff members who hit 10 or 20-year milestones this year. And that's just some of it. We have Looking Glass Rock Writers Conference, partnership with the college. We do memoir classes. Brevard Music Center shows at 1 p.m. this month is the right time for it at the library. We update our collections constantly. We have yoga and movement classes. We do an All Things Appalachia speaker series most months. We have story time every week. We offer lots of tech help to people. If you got a new device and you don't know how to use it, come see us. We keep adding more things to loan. We have games, ukuleles, a variety of different instruments, and yard activities. Puzzles, yes. So we're interested in expanding that. Our challenge is where to put the stuff that we want to loan. But if you have ideas for what you want, let us know. We have a Chautauqua series of historical enactors, NC Reads book groups, community meeting spaces, hands-on and craft programs that we're constantly expanding, foreign policy book group, Paws and Pages, where kids can read to therapy dog, Super Soak Saturday, which is this month, maybe the 27th. It's a couple Saturdays from now at the rec complex. We partner, and it brings out, last year there were over 1,000 people who came out for this. It is water festivities. We do a roundtable. This is not a public event, but for community nonprofit and human services workers. It's a monthly meetup at the library so that people who work in those fields can exchange information and network. We answer so many different questions. Oh, and last but not least, that was Noontime Notions there. And that's just the ones that I could think of as I was brainstorming to create this graphic. There's more. So we're busy, and our numbers show that. Our fiscal year wrapped up in June, and we're getting our preliminary numbers in. And so last year, we had over 160,000 visits to the library. 23,800 program attendees, and that is an all-time record. We have records going back all the way to 1944 when that library became official, and this was the highest of all time. And over 367,000 checkouts. We're still adding a couple collections to this number, and that is also an all-time record. It takes a while to get all these numbers compiled and compared with our peer libraries, so this is a year older, and I'm not going to go in detail, but among the 71 county and regional library systems in North Carolina, per capita, we are number 2 in library visits per capita. Yeah, we're number 3. These might change because we just had some big record breaks. Number 3 in program attendance per capita. Number 1 in checkouts per capita. Number 2 in children's checkouts per capita, which I always think is extra notable because we have a smaller young population in our community. And number 3 in digital checkouts per capita. And amongst our peer libraries, we're almost always number 1 in most of these, but for the last year that we have this information, we're number 1 in all of them. So, you guys use the library, and so we did that collectively as a community. So people want to know about money, and this is the year that we just wrapped up where our library county budget came from. So if you look at the county budget and you look at the library lines, this is what you see. We get a small portion from the state, and that's actually an increase. In the last legislative session, the state approved recurring increase in state funding to libraries, which was a very happy surprise to all of us. And most of our funding, which is normal for public libraries, is local. And these numbers reflect our operating costs, so our staff, books, electronic materials, office supplies, things like that. What's not shown here is things like housekeeping and maintenance, so we actually do get more support from the county than what's shown in just the county budget lines. And by North Carolina standards, our per capita funding is really strong. We have a lot to be fortunate for in that regard. By national standards, we're fairly average. So North Carolina public libraries are not funded fabulously. The other thing that's not in this county budget are all of our programs and events. So many of those things and those photos that we just went through. For that, we rely on direct community support through our 2 associated nonprofits. The Friends of the Library was organized in 1957 as an AAUW project. And its day-to-day funds come from annual memberships, $15 a year per household, and book sales, and some donations. And it provides most of our day-to-day library support. So that's things like our concerts, summer reading, Noontime Notion, Zoom passes, Chautauqua series, yoga, non-traditional library materials. That all comes from the Friends of the Library. Our Library Foundation, which was originally the nonprofit that ran the library, when it became the county department, it switched to become a library foundation, is more future-oriented. It acts as an endowment, primarily. And its primary income comes from donations, memorials, and bequests. And it does fund special projects and programs, capital improvements. A lot of our local history initiatives are funded by the Library Foundation. Looking Glass Rock Writers Conference, the digitization of the Transylvania Times. When we did our refresh and got our new logo and look, that was a Library Foundation supported effort. So big things. And the McDowell Speaker Series. And I do want to share a sneak peek with you. We haven't made it a public announcement yet, but it's also not a secret because it was just official. Our fall speaker for the McDowell Speaker Series is going to be Rick Steves, the travel. Yeah, we're very excited. So the two organizations have different but complementary focuses. There's occasional overlap. As an example, when we did the story walks, the foundation funded the initial pedestals and equipment, and the Friends provide ongoing support. And I am trying to be mindful of time, so I'll go quickly here. And the point of this slide is to say that this is not something that is universal. In communities where there's not the local support, there's not a community of people who can afford to provide funding through these nonprofits and the pressure to the local government to provide adequate funding for libraries, they don't have the wonderful library that we have for that reason. I always say that for us, we have a great library because we have a great community that supports us, and we have a great community that supports us because we have a great library. They feed into each other, and so that's a hard thing to get going. So when you think about advocating for libraries or talking about libraries, if you have connections, like if you're talking to a state representative or something like that, throw out there that all libraries need support. We also have a lot of support in the form of volunteers. This was our volunteer totals for last year, and it makes a huge difference in our work. So I'm just going to quickly touch on a couple of current trends and topics in public libraries these days. And I know that if I don't talk about this, somebody will ask me about this, and that is intellectual freedom. So intellectual freedom is the right to both seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. It's a core value of the library profession and a basic right in our democratic society. A publicly supported library provides free, equitable, and confidential access to information to people in its community. And so we are responsible for serving all people in the community who have all the perspectives in the community. And just as our community contains a wide range of perspectives, so do our collections. So the way I describe it is that you should be able to come into the library and find something that reflects your values, that you see yourself in, that you care about, that you think is important to you, that validates you. And you should be able to come into the library and find something that makes you mad, that you think is terrible and immoral and a terrible reflection on society, or whatever you want to say. Because as a library, as a public library, it's not our role to take a particular issue. It's our role to make information accessible to everybody. And we also know that it's important to be able to explore ideas that differ from your own. So just because somebody is exploring a book, that doesn't mean that it's a reflection of their own values. It's important to be able to see the wide range of perspectives and opinions in our society. So the library attempts to represent all sides of controversial issues. Our role is to provide information, not advocate specific viewpoints, regardless of what I may personally think, because I am in that same position too. There are things in the library that I love, and there are things in the library that make me grit my teeth. And that's the way it should be. Responsibility for what children read rests with the children's parents or legal guardians, and we are very happy to help people find things that fits the family, that meets either a person's personal needs, standards, or a family's needs and standards. What we resist is people applying those standards to other people. That's counter to what we stand for. So, if you've seen the news lately, book challenges and this principle has taken some beating. So a couple of quick definitions. Censorship is restricting access to information. A challenge is when somebody raises an objection, when somebody expresses concern. I have to say, that's not in itself a problem. It's not a cause for concern. Most of the time when that happens, it's a chance for us to talk about, oh, let us help you find something that does meet your taste. I can see why that would be surprising if you weren't expecting that. Or, oh, this is why we have everything, so that everybody can find the things that they need. That's almost always where it begins and ends. Reconsideration is the formal process to determine if a book meets the library's selection criteria. Public libraries all have policies that outline how books are selected, what criteria are used. And reconsideration is the process of seeing if the book aligns with that policy. And a book ban is the removal of a title because someone considers it harmful or dangerous. So this is 2014, just a heat map of book challenges in the US. This is 2023. There are each year in between, and it stresses me out, so I was not going to include that. But as you can see, there's been a dramatic spike. I kind of feel like libraries have just, how to say this, gotten in the, it's not really that people are concerned about libraries, it's that libraries are a reflection of larger social and political concerns, and that it is coming out there. So these are a couple of case studies, and you can read them or not, but essentially what they show is that book challenges almost never stand up legally. When they go through the court process and there are challenges and there's a whole body of case law that supports this, they get put back on the shelf. So it can be long and unpleasant, but over and over again, book bans fail to hold up. It's a pretty miserable road to go down, but legally there is strong case law for protecting First Amendment rights. Courts have also affirmed that speech is protected unless it violates a specific law. So any protected speech that isn't specifically obscenity, which is a very limited legal definition, child pornography, defamation, false advertising, or harmful to minors, which is also a narrow legal definition, is protected and is able to be in library collections. So that gives me hope. I hope I will also say that here at Transylvania County Library, we have not had any book challenges recently in our library. There have been some in the schools that you may be aware of. Yeah, and they went through the reconsideration process and were put back on the shelf. So those processes consider all of those things that I mentioned very briefly, and that's very light overview of it. But it is a hot topic in libraries. Other trends and things that are important to libraries are digital inclusion and equity. The digital divide is a gap between those who have access to technology and the ability to use it effectively, and those who don't. And we know here locally, in a lot of places, it's hard to even buy good internet, much less have all the resources and learning to use it effectively. Social determinants of health are something that we think about a lot. The social determinants of health are the non-medical factors that influence health outcomes. They're the conditions in which people are born, grow, work, live, and age. And they are shown to have a greater impact on health outcomes than either genetics or access to health services. So factors such as education, income, job security, food security, housing, social inclusion can positively and negatively affect health. So when we design our programs and our services, we want to tackle these in a variety of ways. So those seed libraries, it's a fun way to go out and play in the dirt. It also lets people experiment with growing their own food. Our yoga classes are supportive of wellness and mindfulness. Some libraries act as food distribution points or partner with local healthcare systems. This all varies depending on the community and its needs and what other people are doing. Closely linked to that is social infrastructure. And this is one where I think that we do a particularly outstanding job here locally. Libraries are natural places of community. They're one of the only places where anyone can go and simply be. It doesn't matter what your age is, your background, your beliefs, your financial system. You can go into a library and you are able to be there. Walk into the library at any moment. There will be people who are young, old, affluent, unhoused, religious, not religious, and on and on and on. And there are very few places where that's the case. So people come to the library, some people come to the library because they're lonely and they want to be in proximity to others, and so they sit and read a magazine, or they come and talk to staff for a familiar face. Parents bring their children to story time for the kids' sake, but also for their own, because there are other grown-ups. In recent years, we have been shifting our approach to library programs to include more opportunities for people to interact with each other in low-stakes ways. So that cookbook club, where you eat together, or craft programs where your focus is on the craft, but you're naturally going to talk to the person sitting beside you. Our field trips for grown-ups. They're fun, you learn things, they support many of our other goals, but they're also designed to provide that engagement and that sense of connection and well-being. Libraries are also increasingly relied on to provide wraparound social services as safety nets get less strong. There are more and more people that go to libraries for support. A lot of our reference questions and our tech help questions are related to navigating bureaucracy or accessing resources or online benefit systems, figuring out where to turn for assistance. In larger libraries, it's really common to have social workers working in libraries these days. We do a lot of referrals to other community agencies and try to keep strong connections with them so that we can help people get to where they need to be. We're constantly trying to eliminate barriers. Early on, we said every step of the way as the library evolved, we became more inclusive. That doesn't mean that we're perfect now. People who have not grown up using the library, it can be an intimidating place to go. Library fines, for those of us who can afford to pay our 15 cents late fee a day, that's no problem, but for some families, that keeps them away from the library. People need to see themselves in library collections, and we're constantly trying to improve ours to make sure that they provide mirrors so people see themselves, and also windows to see other people's experiences. So we're constantly trying to make it easier for people to use the library and more welcoming. One thing that we do is we have a limited use temporary card, so if somebody doesn't have a full photo ID, or they're transient, or they've just moved to the area, we can still get a library card for them. That is very limited. So we want everybody to be welcomed in the library, and we continue to strive for that. And that's true. These are all what we are doing, but what libraries, public libraries everywhere, this is what they're striving for. And the last but not least one that I wanted to mention is community partnerships. Because we can't do this alone, there are a lot of things that we want to do, and we're very fortunate here locally that our constraining factor tends to be our staff size. We only have so much capacity. We tend to not, I don't want to say we have unlimited money or because that's not the case either, but a lot of it comes down to how much can we get done in a day. And that's especially unique here, and it's because we have the community support that allows us to do that. So we rely a lot on community partnerships to lift all the boats together. We work with places like the Extension Agency and all of those nonprofits that we mentioned. And almost done. So the 3 points that I want you to walk away knowing are public libraries can do anything, but not everything. So we do have to set those goals and priorities and focus on what's most critical for our community, what's most meaningful, what we can do that other organizations are not doing. Libraries are vital community resources. They're not warehouses of books. And use your library and tell people about it. And I want to thank you for being part of such a supportive community. And I know that I am running on the long end of these presentations, but I'm very happy to take questions. Anything library related? Yeah. Ed? Yes. So the question, I think I'll repeat it in case anybody needed that, is are we able to do all those programs with the support of the Friends and the Foundation? That's really where that comes from. The Friends of the Library, their budget for supporting library services, not just their operating budget this year, is around $90,000. And that's, when I tell other places about this, other libraries about this, they're shocked. They have long had a goal of hitting the 800 membership mark, and they just did. So it really is a group effort. The Friends of the Library operate the Second Story bookstore in the library and sell used books on eBay and on Amazon and do the big annual book sale, and that brings in a lot of money. There are some friends who are working very hard in there on a regular basis. And if you are not a friend, it's $15 to join, Alice says. Are you talking about, yeah. Are you asking about the way that the space is laid out or about the way that we prioritize our services? Okay, yes. I didn't talk a lot about books in this because I often take for granted that that's a given, but I always want to underpin that is our bread and butter. We are books and. So as libraries, we want to support lifelong learning and access to ideas, and I would say that to answer your question, where we've expanded is the ways that we support doing that. So it used to be more strictly focused on books, and we've expanded it. We had the curbside service like 2 days after we closed our doors to the public. It was running. It was. I've been trying to remember if it was the next day or if it was 2 days. It was within that realm. And we got really lucky there because some of us had just been to one of those conferences, the Public Library Association conference, and one of our team members attended, just randomly, not related to the pandemic, a session on how to offer curbside service. So, and I will also say that even if we hadn't done that, all of our library listservs and communication channels were sharing information about that immediately. But we were a little faster because we had just done that. Yeah. Yeah. Alice is going to start making me twitch here. What she's referring to is during the pandemic, when everybody was doing things that were not normal, for a while the library operated the COVID call center for the county. And that was in the early days of vaccine distribution when there was so much more demand than supply and everything was very uncertain. We were making those appointments, and answering all kinds of different questions. No, never thought about that one. But we knew how to organize things and communicate with people, and we were trusted. So I think that was a factor, is because when people knew they were talking to somebody at the library, first of all, they didn't expect us to be absolute experts, and on the whole, they were nicer to us than they might have been to some other people. Yeah. Yeah. Right now, so the question is about digital books and how they're expanding. About 75% of our circulation is print or physical items, so DVDs, ukuleles, so on. So things that people access directly. And that is up. The number, I'm not going to give you a quote for the numbers because I don't remember numbers, but the actual number of physical checkouts this year in our record-breaking year was higher than it was last year in our third highest year on record. So our physical material checkout has gone up. Our digital checkout went up more. So about 25% of our checkouts last year were digital. The year before, I think it was 21, 22%. So we locally have not seen that shrinking our physical checkouts, but it is expanding our overall usage. And I will also say that providing digital resources is a lot more convenient for many people to access library resources. It's also a lot more expensive for us to provide. So that's a challenge for us. So when you see long wait lists or only so many checkouts per month, that really boils down to money. The publishers are not going to give us unlimited access, is what there are many different ways to license materials, but when we do, it tends to either be for a certain amount of time or a certain number of checkouts, and it's one user at a time, because otherwise we could buy one copy of the new Kristen Hanna book and meet all of our demand, and the publishers, I kind of can't blame them, but they would not come out ahead on that. So it's complicated. Digital licensing and providing is messy because there are so many different models. So we try to navigate that and maximize our local resources. Yeah, Libby is one of our platforms for providing that. And we have a specific, we have two options for accessing materials on Libby. We're part of the North Carolina Digital Library, which is a consortium of libraries, and there is NC Kids Digital Library, which is specifically focused on grades K through 3, although there's some relevant materials a little bit on either side of that range. And so you can add those libraries and use your Transylvania card. Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of people don't even realize that there's a public second floor to the library, much less a North Carolina room and genealogy support. So if you want to learn your family history, even if you're not local, they still help or if you have a piece of property that you want to know what happened, if you want to know the history of anything that happened in this community. When we moved into the new library, which we call it the new library, but it's 18 years old. So it's really not that new. We need new carpet. But when we moved into the new library, we got the county archives, and that became the core of that. So there's a tremendous wealth of resources there. Anything that's Transylvania related that you're wondering about, let that be your first stop. Yes, they gave us their photo archives, and the Library Foundation supported the digitization of the newspaper through the 70s. Yes, the 70s. And they just gave us the go-ahead, and the Transylvania Times gave us permission, which is the other key piece, because it's copyrighted, to digitize up to current day. So that's a matter of going through that process, but that's going to make that, it's freely available online, what we have digitized. You can search for words or names or what have you. That's where I got some of this library history. In the North Carolina room? With genealogy help? We've got one full-time local history librarian, and that's Laura Sperry. We have Erin Weber-Boss, she's full-time, but she also manages our venues. They both have curly hair, so I don't know how to describe them. And we've got a number of part-time people who work very part-time in there. Yeah. So there are a few different people that you might have been helped by. I don't. It might have been Kathy if it was a volunteer. She volunteered. Yeah, she's older than 94 now. I don't wanna, she would tell you that too. But she volunteered for a long time helping people. But no, it was probably Laura, maybe Erin. Laura Sperry. She's our local history librarian. So you could stop by and see. Yeah. 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 It's our local history department that helps with genealogy of all types. So it's a local history department, but they help with all kinds of ancestry searches. Yes. Yeah. It was probably Laura Sperry. Sperry. Yeah, but I'm not positive about that because there are different people who work there at different times, and they're all very good. Yeah, and we have a lot of research tools. Most of them can be accessed from home. Ancestry specifically, you have to be in the library, but you can use your own computer. You just have to be on our Wi-Fi. So you can sit outside of the building and do it too. Yeah. What other questions can I? Yes, David. Yeah. So yes, Canopy is a streaming video service, and that is our one digital resource that is not in our county budget. The Library Foundation funds that, and that has a wide variety of international films, indie films, art house films. Maybe not your newest blockbuster, but there's a really amazing selection in there. We have, when we plan those newsletters, it's a challenge to fit in. It's a real battle for space, but we do have talked about how we need to go back and re-emphasize the things that are tried and true steady things that are always available. Thank you. We all work as a team on that. There's not one single person who does that alone. Did you have a question in the back? Oh. Yeah. Yeah. So what we have a website that has tons of different things. So if you go on there, there's a couple of tabs, and I'm trying to envision it in my head, but yeah, and learn is one where there are a couple different sections of online resources that you can explore, and it's linked there. And on Borrow, if you scroll down, there's the different ebook, digital audiobook, Canopy, newspapers. So I would really encourage exploring those two sections of the website because there's a lot of resources available. Yes, yes. Yeah, we have over 300 book club kits. So those range from, most of them are about 8 to 12 copies of a single title that you can reserve, and that's in there in those services. That you can reserve them up to a year in advance. So if you know that your group is reading something next March, you can book it now and it would be available for you then. That's not through our regular catalog, that's a special reservation. Come hang out with us, come in. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. I have library stickers if anybody wants one. Thank you for having me here.